Hello, my name is Michael Fields. I'm the developer for the Central Library Consortium, and the name of this session is Meet Them Where They Are, making circulation limits easy to understand and modify for Patron Services staff. Which is really just a big, long, fancy way to say streamlining circ setting updates. So why do we do this? Well, it kind of all stemmed from the fact that, for a long time, these kind of circ setting updates have been a thorn in our side. But they're kind of few and far between. It's just kind of and they kind of weren't worth kind of fixing at that point. Well, especially with the pandemic stuff, kind of ramping up before these kind of requests sort of ramped up with them, and then now as things and then as things were in flux all throughout, again it was still they were much more common than they used to be. So we figured it was finally time to kind of go and figure out some sort of system that, while not perfect, solves a lot of the pain points with our old system, while not being a giant development undertaking at the same time. So kind of some of the big problems with the old way that we used to do things were that the old requests that we used to get could very often be ambiguous or unclear or incomplete, or just kind of not have all the information that you might need, or it might have the information that you need but it's in a form that you don't quite understand, or just any number of kind of language barrier problems between those kind of front of house staff and the back end staff. So that was a major problem. And also, even if you were to get handed like the perfect format of request, they lay it all out in just the absolute best way possible. If you are unfortunate enough to have to do those updates in Polaris SA, that process in and of itself is not fun. That Polaris SA data table tool is just not very user friendly, to put it lightly. So, or even if you are fortunate enough to have to be like myself, or have someone like myself on staff that is familiar with SQL and can kind of write some bespoke SQL queries to do these updates, that is certainly much faster, much more much more streamlined, a lot less kind of manual labor through the data table tool. But that's still, that's just another layer of human translation on that process. And that's and we humans are very prone to errors, whether we like to admit it or not. So while sure 900% of the time it goes great, it just there's always that small chance to misinterpret something, or or just plain make a mistake. And and this process kind of again, it's still a human process, but should help factor out a lot of that human factor. So some kind of the pros for this kind of approach. So the first one, I mean, is kind of the big one, is that it standardizes the request format. So whereas before, we personally are a consortium, and we have 17 different member libraries that all will put in requests, and at many of those libraries there are a handful of staff that those requests could come from. So so all the so these requests are in a wide variety of formats. And again, that's just understanding the intricacies of all different ways that people might word things or format things, or or lay them out, whatever. That's there's a lot of overhead to that. And that also ties into, again, if there are 17 plus ways that people are putting stuff in, there's a lot of ambiguity as to what people may mean. What somebody means with one phrase or expression or word may not be what somebody else means. And that's a source of issues. Just again, we're a consortium, so there's 17 different library systems, and they all just have different ways that they all do things, and that is just a constant source of those small problems. And then another big thing is that the once the actual request is in from the staff member, from the library staff, the actual process of then taking that form that they give us and putting it into the database is exceptionally quick. I mean, if you were to see it and have and have capacity to do it at that moment, I mean you could do it within a few minutes, if that. So it's very, very fast. And then also, so this process is based on Excel files, as you'll see a little bit later when I go over a brief overview of the whole process. But these Excel files can serve as kind of a basic sort of history of changes. So if in the future down the road anybody ever wonders, oh, hey, why is this circ setting this or that, or why is this fine code at this value, or why is our loan period for this 14 days or whatever, you can then say, oh, well, back in January, so and so submitted a request to have these things changed, and that's all kind of saved right there in that Excel document. So again, it's not the kind of thing that you want to rely on, but it's something that if that kind of a quick and dirty way that you can go back and look as a kind of rough history. So, but I did mention that it is, like all processes, not a perfect process, and so there are some cons and downsides. Kind of the first big one being is that it does kind of lean a little bit more on the library staff, and is kind of more potentially labor intensive on their end. Since the files are, or since a lot of the work is done through Excel, if they are experienced with Excel, that will somewhat alleviate a lot of those potential headaches, but it's still a potential downside to consider. The second one here, as I mentioned, it works best if the staff are comfortable in Excel. It's certainly not required, and it doesn't require any like super advanced skills, but if the if the users that are going to be using this process have been in Excel before and are comfortable clicking around, and can do some basic stuff, some filtering, some sorting, things like that, they're going to have a much better time versus somebody who doesn't ever work in Excel and they want to go in and change a bunch of settings, and they get hit in the face by 250 rows, and there's 8 columns wide, and that's probably gonna be a little daunting for them. The other big potential downside here is that it requires essentially full access to your SQL database. So this probably, I'm not sure what kind of the situation is for hosted customers at this point. I know that they have some limited ways that they can get access to their Polaris database, but I'm not sure how extensive that access is. So there's a chance it would work in those kind of scenarios, but again, it would depend on these specifics. So, and the big one being the ability to, as seen here, being able to get in and run these update commands. So I mentioned that there was going to be a brief little overview of the process here. So it kind of starts off with these reports, like I mentioned. There's one for each kind of setting type that somebody might want to update. Material loan limits, patron loan limits, fine codes, and loan periods. And then each of those reports has parameters where the staff can go in and pick, the branches that they want to update for, the patron codes, and then as well as like the whatever kind of like specific stuff is for that report. So and then whatever kind of material type or fine code or loan period, and that way they can kind of narrow down what will show up on that report, because if they're only going to change 2 or 3 whatever patron codes or material types, there's really no need to kind of show them the whole big giant list, because again, then that's also just another potential source of errors. So they run this report, they download the output as Excel, they open up the Excel document, make any of their changes, again, this is where that Excel experience and comfort really comes in handy. After they have their spreadsheet done, they then would follow whatever process it is to then send it to kind of the back end IT consortium, whatever staff. In our case, that is a help desk ticket. There's a small little sub process that the back end staff would then do to kind of process the spreadsheet. I mean, so all it is you paste the formula, propagate it down, copy that resulting new row or new column into the SQL file, and that's it. So yeah, so the library staff will then we'll take that data out of that Excel spreadsheet into the SQL script, and then running that SQL script is what actually does the update. So and then that's it. I mean, and then and it looks a little daunting, I guess, kind of all laid out here in steps like this. It looks like a big block of text, but it is really a pretty simple and straightforward process. So just a couple of resources here before we get to the demo part. Again, my name is Michael Fields. This here is my email. And there's then a link where you can get all of the report RDL files and the SQL scripts that I'll be using later, just a second in the demo. And then you can also register for the Q&A at that last link there. All right, so as you can see here, there are the 4 reports for the 4 different kind of circ codes. So for our demo, we'll start here with the material loan limits. So again, here you will see that the 3 parameters to kind of narrow down what they're going to update. So again, here we'll show you. So if we were to pick, so we'll pick a couple of Fairfield branches. Fairfield. Okay, so if we were to pick all of these, we get a lot of rows, and we get a lot of stuff that we don't need. I mean, just pages and pages and pages. Whereas instead, I mean, because if all they want to do is say, oh, well, we just want to update our audiobooks, our books, and our hotspots, and we only really want to update them for, say, our full access, our kids card, and our newly registered. As you can see now, we have, we still have a good bit of stuff, but again, we're only just over 1 page. So we then save this as an Excel document and open it up. And so this is kind of where that comfort and that experience in Excel comes in handy. Because like I said, I mean, a lot of the actual like heavy lifting happens here in Excel. So, I mean, I'll show you kind of a couple of the big ones here, and actually, I guess the one real big one here is filtering. Because again, this will save you a lot of headaches. So so if you want to go in here and change all these books, you could go through one by one, but that would take you all day. Well, instead you can go in here and say, well, I only want to see the books right now, and you can even go further and say, I only want to see ones where they're not 0, because because we're going to increase them, where they're currently allowed to check them out. We're gonna go from 50, we're gonna go to 75 instead to match our request limit there. And we can do a similar thing here. So we can then go and say, okay, now changes our audiobooks. And then again, this is our filter here where we have these zeros unselected, so that way any place where they're not currently allowed, it's going to stay that way. So then, these maybe we want to reduce it, to 25 instead, and so we can then see, let's clear our filter. And so you can then see, that these places where there's 0 are still 0. And so again, that just helps save you a lot of having to go in your, one by one. You can instead, just change one and copy it down, assuming that they're always going to be the same across, some of this stuff. So, and then once you have your changes made, you obviously want to go ahead and save this, so that way you don't potentially lose them. And then this is the part where the staff would then send it off, and their help desk ticket, in their email, and their support request, and their whatever, to the, again, the backend staff or whoever that is actually going to do the updating. What they do is they will come into the correct SQL script, copy the Excel formula out of this first line here, paste this into this kind of like this cell next to the first row of data there, propagate the formula down, copy all this out of there, paste it in, into this little spot here that says paste Excel data below and above. Go right in there, and then we just run it. And then here it says query completed successfully. So that means that means that the update happened. And because we did this in a transaction, we'll have to go and commit this transaction and do it twice just to make sure. And then there you go. That's kind of like the whole process. We can go through it again real quickly with like fine rates. Again, we'll come in, we'd go in here, this time, let's say that we're, we are Marysville now. We'll pick Marysville, pick a couple of these branches, pick a couple, actually, pick a couple of fine codes. And then again, pick our patron codes. View our report. Download our Excel. Open our Excel. We here at the CLC are fine free, so all of ours are going to be 0 for the most part. But again, we can go in here and just say, pretend that we're going to, for some reason, go away from fine free. We could, go book and say, hey, book we're going to make quarter. Say hotspot. These are pretty pricey things. We're going to make these $5, something like that. And then, then we can then go ahead and clear our filter, save it, send it off to the to the other staff, who then take it up, open our fine codes, SQL, copy this out of here, paste it into our little neighbor cell right there, propagate it down, copy and paste, run it, and query completed successfully. Let's go ahead and double commit, and then that would update our fine codes. So go back to my little resource here slide while I wrap up a little final thoughts. So as you can see, I mean, it's a very simple, kind of very straightforward, really kind of no bells and whistles kind of process, but like I say, it does kind of help take out some of the human element, which kind of was the source of a lot of not even necessarily errors or problems, anything like that, but just kind of hangups in the whole process, and just make it take longer than it necessarily needed to. And I also think that is nice from the library staff's perspective in this solution, where they know that once they have it done on their end, that's kind of the bulk of the work, and once they send it off, that it should be pretty quick to get things done and have their changes up and reflected. And I think it's just a nice thing for them, because they're not sitting out there waiting for weeks while stuff gets figured out. So again, my name is Michael Fields. I'm the developer for the Central Library Consortium. That there's my email. It's where you can find all of the reports and the SQL that you just saw. And then also a link finally there where you can register for the Q&A session.